obviously, you know what song this is. And I was pretty
Yeah.
chuffed the other day when you said this was on your short list because that was
You
my
and I
pick for you.
decided the winner. That's it. We waited for this Aaron guy to be out of town, and you and I decided it's free.
You know it's not going to stick though, right? Because when he comes back, he'll probably have a new list of like 20 different ones. You're going to
Of
have to
course.
go back to the committee, do a new
And
pitch,
then,
Tom.
and then on News Quiz, he's going to ask what the 5 top picks were.
Exactly. Can you call in that day and win the news
We'll do.
quiz? Because
We'll do.
finally, we need a news quiz winner. It's been way too long. It might as well be you, Tom.
Fine.
All right. So listen, not that the world needs any more Pierre Poilievre, in my humble opinion, but here is a wee clip of his press conference earlier today in Markham, Ontario.
Yeah.
That's why I'm running for prime minister. I want to make this the freest country on earth so that everyone can chart their own course and be masters of their own destinies.
Oh my God. Sorry. There's so much to unpack there. A, you're not running for prime minister, buddy. You're running for the leader of the Conservative Party, masters of their own universe. Tom, 5 now candidates total. I still think it's really a 2-horse race. What are you expecting in all of this?
Well, there's a great portrait of Pierre Poilievre in this month's Maclean's magazine. And it's interesting because in there they talk about him winning a prize, or 10 people won a prize for the best essay when he was in high school. And his was about freedom. So it's obviously something that he's carried with him for some time. But when you compare Canada to, well, just about every other country on the planet,
Yeah.
you'd be hard-pressed to find a country with more freedom. So what's he talking about? The freedom to shut down the downtown core of our nation's capital for weeks with loudly blaring horns on big 18-wheeler trucks? Because he applauded those people and said they were fighting for their freedom. But their freedom from what? There was a basic rule that the Americans had, that we had, that you had to be vaccinated to go across the border. So he wants people to be free from the obligation to follow the law when it's put in place to protect the public. So this is the juvenile aspect of everything that Poilievre puts together. I mean, you know that I had more than my fair share of disagreements with Charest over the years. But looking at Charest's polish and his presentation and his thought-through approach, they're not even on the same page. So getting back to a discussion we had on Friday, what's the result going to be? Well, we should talk about Patrick Brown.
Let's
the
talk
mayor
about
of
Patrick
Brampton
Brown.
coming into this race, because I think that's going to change everything for Charest.
Okay, that's interesting to me. So I was thinking, Aaron and I spoke to Patrick Brown, I think it was back in December when he came out so vehemently against Bill 21. And I find myself wondering now, was that just a sort of almost advanced ploy to increase his name recognition in Quebec?
Well, it certainly did that, but it didn't work in the right direction for him. But look at the man's history. I mean, he was the object of a brutal personal attack that turned out to be false. And he survived, left provincial politics. He had been, for 3 years, the leader of the provincial Progressive Conservatives in Ontario, was obliged to leave that, thrown out by the other members of that caucus. Turns out that the attack against him was just false. Picked himself up, dusted himself off, ran for mayor of Brampton, won that race. And this guy does one thing like nobody else in the Conservative Party since Jason Kenney knows how to do. He talks to cultural communities. He talks to ethnic and cultural communities. He sold in his leadership race, and he was going to win it, in his leadership race in Ontario, he had already sold 70,000 memberships. Well, guess what? The second choice of almost all of Brown's a progressive. He goes to pride parades. He fights for LGBTQ rights. He's pro-choice. And so he wears that on his sleeve. He doesn't have to be, he's not a Johnny-come-lately to these things. So he's going to be out there selling like crazy. And since he's cut from the same cloth as Charest, what's going to happen is Charest's second vote is going to be Brown, and just in case Charest doesn't, beat him in the first round, which I think he will. And then if Charest does do that, then he'll get on the second round a whole bunch of those tens of thousands of votes. For Charest to win, he needs to sell 1,000 new memberships per day, every day from now until the middle of June.
That's a lot.
That's the big difference. Some people were looking at a single poll that said, Poilievre's got this sewed up if you talk to Conservative members. Answer, yes, he does. If the vote were tomorrow, Poilievre would win. But the vote's in a couple of months. So the real question is who sells the most membership and who gets the most second place votes. And I think that will clearly be Charest.
We know the power of Charest, right? We've spoken so much about his charm, his charisma. He's got it for days and days. But the way you're describing this to me, no matter what the outcome here, whether it be Poilievre, whether it be Brown, whether it be Charest, the Conservative Party seems like it's still going to emerge even further divided.
Well, that depends on who wins and how they play the game. Because if it were Poilievre to win, it wouldn't be further divided, but it would be the divided one that it is, with no ability to attract middle-of-the-road Canadians, which would simply mean that the Liberals would be there forever and ever, amen. Mm-hmm. So if they do manage to reach out and come to some sort of understanding that if you want to run a country like Canada, you've got to be in the middle of the road. You can't be hard left or hard right. Canadians don't go for that. And of course, Poilievre is very hard right.
Yes.
The current leader, the interim leader, Candace Bergen, I ran a picture of her because people thought I was just kidding them when I told them that she had a Make America hat. Great Again hat. But she actually did. She wore it. And she was proud to be photographed with it.
Good God. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know right there. But I also feel that hearing Pierre Poilievre saying you can be master of your own universe tells you everything you need to know about him. Let's talk about... Go ahead.
No, I mean, that's the big thing, right? And Poilievre is going to have his second vote person, who's Leslyn Lewis, and she ran in the last campaign, did quite well, got a lot of votes. She is the darling of the anti-abortion movement in Canada. Yes. So she's strongly against a woman's right to choose. Her own reproductive choices don't belong to her. They belong to the government as far as she's concerned. So she would, that way it's quite interesting for Poilievre. He doesn't have to get himself too involved in that debate because he knows that those votes are going to her on the first round. She will not make it through. She's not going to be the next leader of the Conservatives. But who's going to be the second choice of most of her voters? It's going to be Pierre Poilievre. So he's got the same deal implicitly going with her that, of course, Charest and Brown have. Now, I don't want to make too much of it, but Brown does describe Charest as being one of his political mentors, which is a nice way of saying they're on the same page.
I wonder if they end up canceling each other out. Anyway, we shall see. I'm very curious about Ukraine. President Zelensky is going to be addressing Canadian Parliament tomorrow. We are going to have that live for you here on CJAD 800. It starts around 11:15, we think. So, Tom, we can certainly expect him to renew the calls he's been making for a no-fly zone over Ukraine. I think he'll call out Canada in general for not doing enough. What else are you anticipating him having to say?
I think that in the case of Canada, he's got a special ally in our Deputy Prime Minister. Yes. And Chrystia Freeland isn't only of Ukrainian heritage, she studied there. There are published reports of the fact that she used to give fits to the Russian Secret Service because they had trouble keeping up with her. And she's really the darling there. People understand that they've got one serious ally. Canada, in terms of our overall demographic, has done a lot in terms of supporting, at least financially. We don't have much to offer in terms of the military, except we did one thing that very few other countries were able to do. Long before this war started, Canada had spent years sending our top military people to train the Ukrainian military. And when you've trained 35,000 people, a lot of those people right now are on the front line giving fits to the Russian army, and Canada can take some credit for that.
Do you think beyond that, and I know we've discussed this last week, but do you think we've gone far enough? 5 new sanctions against those oligarchs being announced today, or on Friday rather. Do you think, he's going to ask us to do more. What more can we do?
Well, I think that right now Canada is doing what it can. We're not going to get into a shooting war with Russia, because that does mean the start of the Third World War. And I know that a lot of people are frustrated with that as an answer, but it's got to be the answer for now. Russia is going to have a permanent international black eye from this. The Ukrainians are not a small country of a couple of million people that they can just gobble up. It's 45 million people that a country of 140 million thinks that they can swallow. They can't. Yeah. They're going to deal with a permanent insurgency. Their troops and whoever's on the ground for them will face this forever. And this is not the way it's going to end. I liked it last week when I heard Trudeau say at the end of the week, Putin is going to lose. Now, that might be some wishful thinking, but it's also a way of pushing back against the ambient theory that there's no other result possible here. The Russians are just going to crush them eventually. And I think what they're trying to say is this is never going to be over that easily.
So just before we run out of time here, Tom, I want to touch quickly on Dominic Anglade spoke to David Hertel this morning. He's in for Elias, and he asked her, of course, about these horrific poll results that they've plummeted by 13 points in terms of support for the Quebec Liberals, and she kind of glossed over it. Now, you and I have spoken many times about how much we like about her, how much we respect her, and yet somehow this failure to connect. She can't just be glossing over poll numbers, can she? Like that? I know we're 6 months out, but still.
Well, I mean, there's no right answer, is
Yeah.
there? I mean, she's facing abysmal poll numbers. She's having her vote pulled at left and right. She's got some dissatisfied Anglos mumbling about forming another party, which if they did would, this is not when, Cliff Lincoln and Herb Marks and Rick French quit the Liberals over Bill 101 stuff. We're not even in that territory at all. I mean, it would be a bit suicidal for them to pull that sort of stunt now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way everybody's feeling. Quebec Solidaire is pulling solidly at one of the weakest elements of the Liberal plan. They have nothing to say about Bill 21, except to say that somehow maybe they not renew the notwithstanding clause, but if it went to court while it was still there, they'd have to defend it. The position of the Liberal Party on Bill 21 makes zero sense.
It's
but
weak.
then again,
So weak.
when David Birnbaum decided to vote and to propose that if you're studying science, you have to do at least 3 of your courses, your physics, your chemistry, and your biology in Cégep in French. Not a French course to make sure you speak French, but no, you're going to be studying your sciences in French. And it came out of nowhere, and it made absolutely no sense. And I don't know a single person other than David Birnbaum in the English-speaking community who ever thought that this was a good idea. But there he went. And so you can't even blame, we can take shots at everybody else, but I mean, it wasn't even the Liberal Party policy because, as Anglade correctly stated, that was an idea that was floated when there was no talk of limiting access to English Cégep. It was their sort of ideas that they had cobbled together. But here, it was the worst of all worlds. You're dealing with Simon Jeannin Barrette, who is dismantling the English school Cégep system, who is putting in the quotas on access to English Cégeps. Oh, and by the way, the Liberals were kind enough to offer up their thing, which was a proposal made in a completely different context. So poor Anglade, she's getting it from the opposition party, the other opposition parties, but she's also getting, friendly fire from within her own caucus. So it's very, very tough for her right now. But you know what? Bourassa used to always say a month is an eternity in politics. By that count, we've still got lots of eternities between now and the election. And Anglade, of course, will start to be much better known by the voting public because she'll have cameras on her every day, something she didn't have during the pandemic. And I think the numbers on her side should start to get a lot better.
Well, we shall see. It's always great to talk to you, Tom. Thanks for your time.
Good to talk to you. All the best.